Hi, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Oh, seems like every time I get on the camera nowadays, I've just been down to, or across to Taliban, and today was no different. We had to pick up some paper that was needed for some documents we're printing, and so I had to meet with Anna Marie, who is helping us. So there was that, and I had to pay a debt from at a store that does parts. They do parts for vehicles, and I always go to this little store, and they treat me very well. I've explained once before about how generally repair shops work here in the Philippines, and it's not how they do in the US or the UK. In Western countries, generally speaking, unless it is a repair that crops up that wasn't initially thought of. I mean, for instance, supposing you went in and you wanted the brakes, you wanted fluid put in the master cylinder, and you were expecting that it would just be checking oils. And then when they look, they find that you need new brake shoes. Well, you'd probably get a phone call, and they would say, you're going to be pretty low on brake shoes, brake pads. What do you want us to do? And they would give you that opportunity, and they'd say, the brake pads are X number of dollars or pounds. And then you'd make a decision and say, okay, go ahead. And you would pay the entire bill when you went in, labour and parts, and they'd show you what they'd put in. And the good shops would show you the worn out brake pads. Well, they do that here too. But here, unless you have a prior understanding, and this usually is arrived at after a period of time where trust is finally achieved between the two parties. So the person who is repairing would trust that you would honour your agreements if he does the work, and fairly obvious stuff, you know. Well, what they would normally do prior to that trust being, and I don't know that everybody has this agreement, my agreement with the man that does the repairs on the truck is that he will look at the repair, he will look at what's needed, and then he'll send somebody down, it's about a quarter of a mile, barely that, down to the shop that I just described, and they would be authorized by me to just give them the parts. So if he goes down there and it needs new brake pads, and it needs brake fluid, and it needs brake shoes on the back, and a new tire, well, they would hand that stuff over to him, record it on a bit of paper actually, and then when the job was done, I would pay the labour, and then I'd go down to the store and I'd say, okay, what's the bill? And I would pay whatever was done. That's the trust that's there. All around trust. And that's how it works. But what's the cost? If you, for instance, my repair yesterday, when the red was being used, and it was being used for carrying a lot of ballast, sometimes bagged and sometimes just dumped straight into the truck bed. What happened was that when it was dropped, as the tailgate was dropped down, so tailgate is up like this, and then it gets dropped down, and then it had some heavy weight on the tailgate, and what happened was that the tailgate, instead of being like this, got a little bit like that, and then when you put it back up, it won't close. So it needs to have the oxyacetylene torch on it, heat that hinge and push it back in so that it's in the right place again. So I had that repair done. I had the fuel gauge repaired, and judging by what I had to pay when I went to the parts shop, there was nothing about a sender unit from the tank. And when I went in on the day that it was repaired, I found that they had the dashboard out. So I would assume, logic and a little assuming makes me believe that the fault was not in the tank but in the dashboard, and it was an electrical fault, that some kind of sender was not working. I'm not a mechanic, and that's why the fuel gauge was not working. So anyway, now happily it's working. He also did a repair and replaced the clutch cable. So the clutch cable was replaced, whatever that took. And when I went in and paid the labour bill, let me see, it was, okay, now it was $1,350 I believe it was. Where am I? Yeah, let me see, 1, 2, 13, oh, divided by 52. So we're looking at $32. Is that right? Can it possibly be right? No, it's not. It can't be right. Well, it was 1,350 pesos. So if you work that out, that it was 1,350 divided, and I haven't got my glasses on. It's gone and messed up again. That gives you an idea of what the cost would be. Now when I went and paid for the parts, then that was whatever the parts cost. And I never quite get how they work out the price of things here. And I think it's because we're on an island and some things will be what they call original. And if they're original, then they're likely to be more expensive. Alright, so yeah, the price was $25, I think. So that was for a fair amount of work done. It was done at my convenience. In other words, I took it in on the day and I asked him, when can I pick it up? And this was about 11 o'clock, and he said come back at 2:30. Now why 2:30? Because he wouldn't start it before 12, because he would be at lunch, and he'd be at lunch until 1, and then an hour and a half he would work on my truck. Now I think that I probably pay a little bit more than other people. But then when I go in, he actually stops working on whatever he's working on and he handles my problem. So I think that that's probably worth a little bit more. I don't think it's a huge amount, but that gives you an idea. Now I had a new tyre put on, and it was a what the Brits would call a town and country tyre, but I guess you'd call it an off-road tyre, which I'm sure that you have seen on the red. And it's a very knobbly tread, okay? So I had that replaced, plus a new inner tube, and parts and labour, everything all included, fitted at my convenience. I drive in, they fit it there and then, and the cost for that was 3,600. So 300 for the inner tube, and the rest was for the tyre and fitted. So here they don't have a balancing machine always wherever you go, so sometimes it's Hobson's choice on that. But that's what it cost me for that. So work that out, 3,000. I'm just looking now. I don't think it that 1,300 is 25 bucks or anything like it. But anyway, that would be up to you to have a look. So that gives you an idea of the kind of costs that you have. If you have a flat tire or just a slow puncture, you take that in and it will cost you about 50 pesos, $1. Right. Now the thing is, you can't, I don't feel that you can talk in terms of dollars while you're living in an economy that is, well, that's run by pesos. How can you do that? Unless all of the money that you get is all in dollars, and handsomely so. But I think if you are wise, you will always start to think in terms of the whatever the currency is, wherever you are. So it makes sense to think in terms of pesos. And the main reason for this is because if you're judging a price by dollars, then you're judging it according to another country's. That's a no-brainer, isn't it? But also what you're failing to do is to judge whether the equivalent, whether that's a competitive price within the economy that you're living in. So how would I know that 1,300 pesos was a good price to have paid for that repair, or that series of 3 repairs? How would I know? Well, I would know if I asked around and said, in conversation to other people, what do you think? I was charged 1,300 pesos. Do you think that was reasonable? And you usually get some kind of feedback on that, and then you'll know whether you're being ripped off, or whether you're being gouged. Shall we say gouged a little, because you're a foreigner. So you eventually come to an understanding with the people that you work with. If every time you go in you think, well, that's a lot, you can actually say, well, wait a minute, that seems like a lot, and you can bargain it down. I prefer not to have to bargain down, so I like to get that sorted out fairly early up front. And normally we send other people to the people that we trust. When we had our television, we had a television fixed that the cat peed in. It went, and if you've ever seen a cat and they spray, they lift their rear end up like that, and it is a spraying. Well, it went in the back of the TV as we were watching. Did that cat just pee in the back? And then the TV goes poof, and we say, well, yes, he did. So anyway, the advice from the repairman was, please pay 500 pesos, and that included the spare parts, and explain to your cat where the CR is, or the bathroom, or the toilet. So that's how you arrive at paying any price anywhere, unless you go to a big, like we have what is called Alturas. And Alturas is the name of what has now become a pretty big, a very big store, and they've got a hardware store. They've got a place for office stuff that kids can go to get notebooks and all of that. They've got a huge supermarket with as many as 30 or 35 checkouts. And believe me, when the store is crowded, every one of those checkouts is busy and operative. So that, and they also have a department store which handles toys, handles dolls, it handles domestic stuff, it handles furniture, clothes, you know, pretty extensive. And so that's what we deal with. Now, there's no getting deals on that, because here the average Filipina or Filipino worker does not have the power of making a judgment call. So this gives some pretty funny situations. I know that when I was in Pampanga, I actually needed just half a sheet. Well, not even half a sheet, but I was willing to waste the rest of it just to do a little project that we had. And my son and I were doing this project. So we went to the equivalent of the Home Depot, and we went in there, and I said, you know, I don't think that we're going to be able to buy half a sheet of plywood, because they sell whole sheets, and why would they do anything less? Well, we looked on the racks of plywood, and lo and behold, there is a half a sheet of plywood. Well, we were delighted, and I called a guy over who's serving. I said, "So we'd like to buy this half sheet of plywood," and he said, "Oh, it's not for sale." I said, "Well, you are selling plywood, aren't you?" And he said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, and that is plywood. See my sort of top-heavy kind of logic when I'm talking." And I say, "So if you're selling plywood and that's plywood, that should be for sale, shouldn't it?" He said, "Yes, sir," which means no. So I said, that gives me my regular phrase that I use with Beth. So is that yes, it is for sale, or yes, it's not? And he said, yes, it's not for sale. So the problem was that the price was cut off of the other end, and the price was for a full sheet. But they'd obviously used half of that piece of plywood, that 8x4 plywood, they'd used it for doing something in the shop, in the store, and then they'd put what was left back on the shelf, on the rack. But they couldn't make a judgment call and say, well, you know, the full sheet was X amount of pesos, so half a sheet will be half that, and cash it in at the cash desk. There was no policy for being able to do that. Whereas in the US, if you went in and you found there was a half sheet, that would be in the culled, I think it was called the culled wood, and that would be pieces that had been in some way messed up as far as their full sizes went, and they would sell it as culled, and the man that you spoke to would be able to make a judgment call, and he'd write you out a little slip saying half a sheet of plywood, X amount of dollars. So, but when it goes to the cash desk, they understand that because it's got on it culled, and he's signed it and said this is how much it should be. So they can do that. They can't do it here. So things are as they are, and you gotta like it. So what happens with my my car repair, truck repair, if they need something, they pop down to that little store that's very, very close. The store gives it to them on credit. They don't have to pay any money. And then I go in later after the repair is done, and I know exactly what has been used, and I just ask, well, I ask at the store what was needed, and they tell me and give me the price, and it's all done on trust, and I'm quite happy with that. So if you can work out a deal with the people that do your work, then they'll trust you to do it. And probably this is one of the situations where being a foreigner will work for you, whereas they might not do that, ironically. They might not do that for a Filipino. Okay, so much for talking about, waffling on about prices. I just thought I'd give you a little idea of how that works. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Gradually I am seeing that there are some comments coming through, but in a general sense it doesn't seem like we've been released from that particular binding. Let's hope it's soon. Don't forget to at least subscribe and like. Bye for now.